I think, though, it was while George Meany was the president there, that the executive board brought it up. It never was voted that they wouldn't hire married organizers, because they were away from home so much and all that. It never did go through, and it wouldn't have worked anyway. It would have been discriminatory in a way. But they did talk about that organizers had to be away from home so much, and when they were at home, they were going out to meetings and all. And where the wife wasn't supportive of the husband, it really created problems. And a lot of wives were not supportive. And I think that's true today, too. They want that old man out there on that job making money. They don't want him out here walking no picket line. So,
Yeah. Do you think that you posed a real, that you sort of provided a new model of what a woman could do?
I think I did among a certain element of the people. You know, these country club and the ladies' DAR societies and things like them considered me a threat. I was no role model to them. But I might have been to people who, all these people here remain my good friends. We were all friends. And I think I might have been to them. I hope I was. And I could have been with them.
As an organizer in 33, what about that?
Well, I think I provided some of that. You know, I did things that went out of my way to prove, that we can do this.
That women can?
Yeah, that women can do this. And I think a lot of them, because we had some good people at the time to come out of this. They found jobs other places. Some of them went into the shirt factory. As I said, they didn't check any references. They didn't care anything about that.
And when you look at this
Yeah.
list of people, what do you see?
I see Frank Bales, your first one here, was a real small guy. He was a loom fixer, and he was one of the most ardent strikers that we had. He picketed all day, every day. He didn't want to go home. I see Frank Bales as that. And the two Connor girls, Fanny and Lucille, they were very active. And this,
Well, did you see a transformation in them as they got more active?
yeah, sure. I'm sure wherever Frank Bales went, he went into construction after he was blacklisted there. And I'm sure he was a good union man in his construction trade.
What about those the Connor girls when they came in? Were they
Um,
were they different a year later?
um, I'm going to have some more water.
I'll go get.
J.R. Coop. I think somebody pronounced that Cope last night. It's not, it was Coop. It's pronounced Coop. He and his wife were both very good strikers. And he was the one that I told you was a socialist. He was, along with two or three others, were socialists. And he went on to become an organizer for the textile workers. He organized all over the South from that. And Roxy was very active in everything and loved to write letters.
And when you say very active in everything, what do you mean? Because I don't know. I wasn't there.
Oh, well, attended meetings of Central Labor Council was one. A lot of them, whether or not they were delegates, they attended meetings of the Central Labor Council, and we encouraged them to do that. That they, wherever else they were going to work, we want them to carry that union idea with them. So we encouraged them to do that. And I see you've got W.D. Campbell down here. This was the preacher. He was our first president, and he was good, and he didn't know much parliamentary law, but he knew how to sway a crowd, because in his little storefront churches, He'd been used to doing that. And Inez Deputy was one that was very active too. Um,
One of the reasons Horace Hickam.
Horace Hickam. Now he should be given an awful lot of credit because his brother was one of the bosses in the mill, and still he was locked out. Yeah.
What gave him the courage to challenge
Uh,
his brother?
I don't know, but he sure did. He sure did. He challenged him, and he was locked out. And his brother, Beach Hickam, was one of our supervisors down there. And Dovey Harrison she was a right gutsy little gal too, and she defied the customs there. She had a baby out of wedlock. Didn't tell anybody about it.
That was while she was working there?
Uh-huh. And this Luther Harbin, he was a straw boss.
What does that mean?
The lowest boss. Like he was the boss only over winding machines. He wasn't over the whole. The winding machines were a part of the spinning room. He was not over the whole spinning room. He was the straw boss for winders only. And he came out with us, stayed out with us. And the last account I had of him, he died not very long ago. And I didn't realize he was that old. He was nearly 90 years old. And he went into, I'm sure that job is long since played out, but he went into the business of cleaning wallpaper. Not hanging it, but cleaning it.
No. Did he stay in Knoxville?
Oh, yeah, he stayed in Knoxville.
Is he dead?
Yeah, he died, I believe it was early this year, because I had no idea he was as old as he was. But
No,
he was
Lucille,
old.
what was he one of the only? Was it rare that a straw boss came out on strike?
Oh, yes, he's the only one I ever heard of.
Why did he do that?
I don't know. He just had more guts than any of them. And he used to tell us when we were organizing there. I know he told me one night. He said, "Have you got whatever her name was down here at the Ann frame?" He said, "Is she signed up?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Let me know the ones that absolutely won't sign up, and we'll get rid of them." I didn't want him to fire anybody, but I did want them to join, and so he coerced them into joining. So
How'd you feel about that?
we liked him. We liked him.
Now, was he allowed to be in the union?
Yeah, because see, he was just a straw boss. We took him in. He didn't have, at that time, and I don't know whether the unions still go with that or not, he didn't have hiring and firing authority, but he could recommend, that he'd say, like, she's not doing her job and she's having too much bad work or something like that, and they'd get rid of her.
Was it a secret that he was a member, or did the bosses know?
The bosses knew it. That's why he was one of the blacklisted ones.
What about during that whole year prior to it?
I don't think I noticed he didn't attend our meetings much because he'd always ask me what went on at the meeting, and he was always on our side. We knew we had him.
That must have been a real coup to get him on your side.
Henry was an old woman at that time. I used to wonder how she could work, anybody being as old as she was.
Did you get a lot of older members?
Yeah, because there was a lot of older women working there. See, we didn't have Social Security then. They had to work until they just couldn't work any longer. But no Social Security, no workman's compensation.
Now, what do you think about older people coming out and joining up? And
Oh,
striking?
we liked that. Some of them were a little too old even to walk the picket line, but they were out with us.
Now,
And Eddie was one of them.
do you think they had more to lose than any of the others? I mean,
Well, in a way they did, because some of the mills probably wouldn't have hired them. still they were experienced on their job, and that's all the mills were looking for, somebody that could turn out the work. They didn't care how old they were.
But it must have been something to have older people.
Oh, we sure did.
How did you try and work with the
We
older
did, and we'd tell these older ones, get these older ones to talk to the younger ones. You know, and they'd tell them, look, I spent all my life standing here at this spinning frame, and I'm not making any more now than I was when I started 40 years ago, or I'm not any better off than when I started 40 years ago. They had a good argument on their side. They could help us. J.H. Linenback was he was a good union man too. He eventually he got in with some outfit. He went through the apprenticeship program to become an electrician, and he moved to Chattanooga, the last account I had of him. Mabel Lloyd was another one who defied tradition and had a baby out of wedlock. Did you ever see that?
What happened to her?
Uh,
Well, I mean, at the time, how did people deal with it?
In the mill, they didn't pay very much attention to it. I'm sure she was ostracized by the rest of the puritanical society, but we never said anything about it. We didn't care anything about it.
Now, if she'd been in a mill village, what would have happened?
Oh, gee. She would have been ostracized. And this E.R. McGinley here, he's the one that I was telling you. He died not terribly long ago, and I was talking to his widow. I couldn't talk to her, though. She's very much Alzheimer's. Great big heavy-set woman. But I asked her if she remembered the strike. And she said, oh, yes, she sure did. But in a minute, it was all gone. J.H. Monroe, Jimmy Monroe was a good organizer, too.
Now, he was the one who went to the... What did the mill do? I mean, who are these people in the mill that... What kind of people are these at the mill?
You mean the bosses?
No, these people that were blacklisted. When you look at all these names, what does it represent for you?
It represents a bunch of people that were looking for a way out, but didn't know what road to take. And when the union came along, they thought that was the right road, and they, not knowing, not having any background in the labor movement at all, they joined that in order to help themselves. That's the way I see them. I see them as, of course, I see them all as good people, you know. Naturally, I would.
Do you see them as courageous?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Because, see, in the first place, it took a certain amount of courage. See, in September of 1934, the New Deal had not, the TVA was just coming into existence, and we weren't out of the Depression in 34. And like these women, for instance, the one I told you here that had the baby, Mabel Lloyd, that had her baby out of wedlock, she was the sole support of that baby. And I think with not knowing the idealism or the background in the labor movement and what it could do for them, I think it took a lot of guts on their part to just leave their job. You know, if nothing else, just to leave their job. And as I said, you know, there were no strike benefits. There was no workman's compensation. There wasn't all these free commodities that people get now. There was nothing. And I think it took guts for them to come out. You know, just to walk off their job. And of course, we were poor too. But one of my sisters was working at the glove factory, and one of them had gone from the Appalachian Mill to Leibowitz Shirt Factory. So at least there was two people bringing home a little paycheck, and our rent was $20 a month, and it was hard to come by. But at least there was two of them, and I was unencumbered, so it didn't take as much guts for me to walk off a job as it did these people, because they didn't know where they were going to go. They didn't know whether they'd be blacklisted. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. So I think it took a lot of courage for them to do it. And the ones that I know about, like Frank Bales, went on to another job, and Preacher Campbell, I never worried about him. He'd make it somewhere. He'd talk himself into something, you know. If he had to set him up a little church in a storefront, he'd pass the hat. He'd make it. He would make it all right. But some of these people, and I often wondered what Luther Harbin's wife. He was the straw boss, and he was probably making as much as $20 a week. And that would be considered a good job then. And I've often wondered, what did his wife think about him walking off that job and getting blacklisted? So I think it took guts for them just to leave their job. It took more guts then than it does now, because I think most of the unions now pay strike benefits. You know, and then too, people have been making money enough that they could have something saved for an emergency. These people had nothing saved for an emergency. They hadn't made anything.
Were these people fighting a civil rights movement, so to speak?
Yeah, it was like that. And by the way, I guess you know this already. There were no blacks in the mill. At one time, one of the mills here had a black woman as a janitress, but there was no blacks. White superiority, you know. They want to work with blacks, but they do now. They're in all the plants.
No, what about the opening rooms and the picking rooms and those dirty jobs? Those were just whites also?
That's whites too. And they hired people too. Maybe that was good and maybe it was bad. I don't know. I know the janitor who pushed the broom. They pushed it continuously, you know, because that lint was flying all the time. They pushed that. And I know the one in our department there. He was severely mentally retarded. So I don't know. Maybe it was good to give him a job. I don't know. But I thought at the time they were taking advantage of him.
Did they ever use the blacks as, you know? Did they ever threaten? I don't know. I mean, did it since?
At that time, we knew they weren't going to hire any blacks, you know.
Did that make it easier to stomach such a low salary?
Yeah. You know, no, it really didn't, because I never had that race prejudice, but, well, it was just the order of the day, you know. Whites are superior, you know, and blacks don't work in here. And that's what that was what everybody thought, you know.
What about lintheads? They weren't superior, were
no, they weren't superior, but they thought they were because they had white skin. It's stupid.
It gave them a little something.
Yeah, gave them a little something, you know. Somebody lower than I am.
What kind of, I look at this and I think, what did the mills lose? I mean, what does this also represent? Does this represent sort of like just the incredible power that they had to destroy I'm fishing,
yeah,
but I'm just wondering, when you look at this, what are all the things that come up for you? I mean, it's a lot of names. But.
Yeah, and I think about the mills probably didn't consider that at all. But look at all those skilled people that they lost. I was a skilled winder. Jimmy Monroe was a skilled weaver, you know, and they lost that too. But they didn't think about that. Just getting rid of us was troublemakers. That was all they were thinking about.
And these troublemakers never came back.
No, no, they never did. But I think all the ones that I know about, you know, they went on to do something else and at least were able to make a living somewhere.
And did any of the others stay in the labor movement like yourself, or did this political involvement?
Yeah, some of them
change
did.
that?
This J.H. Monroe that you have here, Jimmy Monroe, he became an organizer for the Glove Workers Union. There's no Glove Workers Union now, you know, it's a part of Act Two. And that J.R. Coop, he became an organizer. I think they,
Are these people that you trained?
is what?
Are these people that you trained? In a
Um,
sense?
well, in a way, Coop, as I told you, he was an old-time socialist. He knew more than we did. He didn't know. He was no intellectual, but he was pretty sharp. And Jimmy Monroe was. Jimmy and I worked together a lot. We were the ones who wrote up the contract, getting help wherever we could. And I know he got somebody in North Carolina or somewhere that sent us a copy of their contract so we'd have something to go by. We didn't know how to write a contract.
You know, you sound like you're angry at the union because they moved too fast.
You mean in calling that strike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was always, not the whole labor movement, of course, but I thought that those people in Washington, our leaders of our international union, should have known that that was poor timing.
But are there other things that you could look at and say that were really problematic, or in looking back, I mean, why wasn't the South able to organize?
Lack of workers' education. That was it, and I think that that is it to an extent today. If they would only do that, if they would give them some kind of an education. But see, our only selling point was we didn't tell them about, you know, in solidarity there's strength. We told them we can get you better hours, wages, and working conditions because that was all we knew. That's all we knew to tell them. So I think if they'd let us go on and saved our union, and somebody had done a real educational program, they'd probably have a union at Cherokee today. It was just poor timing.
Wasn't it? Don't you think the mill had an inordinate amount of power?
The what?
The mill. Did it?
But maybe I take too much responsibility there. But I feel that if we had done things differently, that we would have saved it.
Did you feel responsible for all these people losing their jobs?
No, not especially because they voted to strike just like I did. And we were all in that boat together when we were unemployed, when we were locked out.
Could you
We,
just explain that?
well, we thought, even though we were in the process of drawing up our contract, we thought, and I was one of them. I was one of them. We thought, well, our international union, those people in Washington, knows what they're doing, and we followed their leadership, which of course we had to do. We would have, you know, I don't know what we would have been considered if we hadn't, because it was a nationwide strike, you know. So we just, we'll go on strike. That's what the international.
So 8 of you voted to go on strike, and 202 said no, we're not going, and then 8 people resigned.
Oh, we had a big meeting like that, and then when a meeting that never was reported, we had a meeting and did some explaining of it and explained to them that it was the international union. And we would have lost our union. I think they would have kicked us out if we hadn't struck, because it was a nationwide strike. And when we explained it, you can see they all came out. No matter how we voted that day, it all came out. They all came out.
I see. I see.
A lot of good things came out of us just organizing. See, in my job as a winder, I didn't know the people in the weave shop, and the weave shop didn't know the people in the card room. But when we'd meet in the union hall, then we could all meet as one. You know, we're all Cherokee employees, and that was a good thing. And we all got to being friends, you know, among people we hadn't even known before. Oh.
Did your uncle running for senator have anything to do
Oh
with
no,
anything?
he's just a politician, and a conservative one at that. Republican. See, my father was Republican.
When did you start becoming aware of politics? Were you very young?
Really, in I guess in the Hoover days before Roosevelt, I knew that we had to have another president, that Hoover wasn't cutting it. And of course my father had always been dabbling in politics. And he was an arch Republican, but he voted for Roosevelt. And of course a lot of Republicans did, you know. Whew.
Did you say we were talking about intergenerational exchanges? No.
Oh, and I started to tell you about Bob Weiler. He was a carpenter, organizer, and international representative. And I was always thrilled when he'd come to Knoxville. He would tell us about so many different things, you know, that had happened in his lifetime. It was just real good. And I remember one thing that he told us about. He was from Kentucky.
And when did he come to talk to you?
Oh, this was about 1935 that he was here.
Was this after the strike?
After the strike.
Was your group still meeting?
This was at a Central Labor Council, and he told us he always liked to tell those stories, you know, about things that had happened to him. And of course, the Carpenters Union is one of the oldest unions, you know, of all. And I guess you know it, but they claim that their first member was Jesus Christ, you know, because he was a carpenter. That was their first member. But he told us a story that I always liked. He was in a small town there in Kentucky, organizing the carpenters, and the United Mine Workers were helping him, and that was the only friends that he really had. So he thought everything was all over. And he got in his car to go home, and he was stopped by a group of people. And they told him to get on out of the state, you know, to go home and all that. He went on that time, but he wanted to go back the next time, back to finish his job there. And when he went back that time, his friends there got concerned about him because they heard that these spies and scabs were going to stop him down the road. So they covered him over with leaves and twigs and all that kind of stuff, put him in a boat and sent him down the river to get him away from them. He loved that. He said, "Oh, I was going down the river."
Was that man really tarred and feathered during this?
Yes, he was.
What happened?
Yes, he was. I don't know that happened. It didn't happen during our strike.
Okay.
It wasn't that. But his name was Homer Wilson. And he was Alma was too young to remember that, but I remember it well. He was an organizer and a member of the Mine Mill Smelter Workers Union. I think that's merged with something else, but that's what he was at that time. And he was tarred and feathered in this neighborhood. And she saw that. Her daddy took her down there, and they were going down to visit a picket line, and they ran into that. That was a terrible thing, but it didn't kill him.
Now, is that the kind of opposition you were up against?
We had some of that. We didn't have we didn't have that kind of violence. We didn't have anybody really run out of town. But we had certainly had our problems.
You know, when I was looking through the paper today, I saw all these headlines about all the violence that was going on all over the country. You know, they were showing pictures of violence in Bibb City and Payne City in Macon, Georgia, and violence in Rhode Island, and explaining, you know, that 6 were killed in Hunyapath. And do you remember that?
Yeah.
How did hearing about the National Guard and the death of these strikers affect you here?
It scared us. It really did. We didn't know how powerful they were, but from what we read, they were powerful, and it scared us. It sure did. And I think it scared some of the people enough. In fact, I know it did, that they wouldn't go to union meetings, and they had nothing more to do with the union, because it did frighten them, and it was a frightening thing.
Yeah, but even the way they played it up in the paper. I think do you think that the paper did it?
Oh, sure, of course they did.
Scare you on purpose?
Sure they did. They, you know, the papers then as now, they like those dramatic stories.
So, you know, then you became somebody that was going to allow your people to get hurt, right?
Right.
Someone that was sticking your people out in the front lines so that they could get hurt.
Right. I was out there with them, though. Right.
Well, I think if you came to me and talked to me, I mean, let's do one more thing, and then we're done, okay?
Okay.
Actually, we could be done.